Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Outside Insider with my dodgy camera that seems to follow me everywhere I go. I can't seem to stop that happening, I'm afraid. But alas, we're here. I was planning on coming back and doing one big free agency recap like as soon as the waters died down. And it feels like every day I've gone to do it, another move has happened. So apologies for the lack of delays or lack of streams following the Super Bowl. I wanted to take a little bit of time just to kind of decompress. I know Brian's obviously been super busy with the birth of his new baby girl, which has been an amazing thing for him and his family. So flipping the bird has been a little bit quiet. I've been a little bit quiet, but the Eagles have not been. And that's what we're here to talk about today and to get back well into the swing of things. So I apologize for this moving around. I really don't know how to stop this camera doing that other than to stay perfectly still. But we're going to go into all of the free agency moves so far, put some grades on them. We're going to talk about today's signing specifically, which is Azeez Ojulari. We're going to go into AJ Dillon, Joshua Uche, and a few of the guys that have been let go, like Mekhi Becton, who was someone that many believe would stay in Philadelphia. I had it on authority from someone very close to PSN and his camp that he wanted to be in Philadelphia and just was waiting to see how the offers stacked up in the open market. Obviously, he ended up with the Chargers. And there's just been a flurry of moves, including a trade which involved Dorian Thompson-Robinson, of all people, come into Philadelphia. We saw Kenny Pickett on the way out, Kenneth Gainwell on the way out. There's been a lot of turnover with this Eagles roster, the team that only recently, of course, won the Super Bowl. So a lot to dive into and a lot to, hopefully get your guys' opinions on. If you are watching this stream, welcome back to the show. I know, again, it's been a little while. Let's get to some of your comments. Marshall Lynch, what camera are you using? My horrible Mac webcam, which for some reason has decided to motion. I don't know how to turn it off. I'm nearly 30 years old. I'm a boomer now. I don't get how technology works, and it won't stop. But again, this is the least of our concerns, probably. Where have I been? We'll get to that one first. If I'm honest, I think after the Super Bowl, I wanted to take a little bit of a break just to kind of recoup and figure out a couple things YouTube-wise. There's been a couple moving parts behind the scenes where it's like I would want to do these big, mega YouTube projects, and I want to wait timing-wise because there might be something happening with PSN in the coming weeks to months. I can't reveal too much on what exactly that is yet, but it's one of those things where we're trying to wait, and it's just one of those things. So on top of that, having a little breather, and then getting ready for the new season. So we're back. I'm not going to miss any more signings. All right, regular schedule viewing is returning. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday, we'll be guiding you through absolutely everything. That is the worst thing you could ever say. All right, Charlton Athletic, they're red as well. All right, let's go with Charlton Athletic. We're all good. Gonna finally get to catch a show live again. It's good to have you back, Mark. It's good to be back. I promise I'll never play hard to get like years past. All right, you get a couple weeks without me. You get a little holiday without the horrible piercing voices, and then we're back in. What's with it? I don't know. I don't know how to stop it. I wish I knew how to stop it. It follows me wherever I go, and I've tried. I've looked in settings, and I can't find it. If anyone knows how to stop an iMac camera doing this, please let me know. In the meantime, it might just be that. You can't figure out how to use Google. What Howie Roseman can figure out to do, though, is make a lot of impressive roster moves. So let's get to the newest one, which came literally a few minutes ago, like before I started streaming. Within the last 20 minutes, I've had to write 2 articles. One of them, of course, on Azeez Ojulari. The other one on Lane Johnson, who has just signed a new 1-year contract extension to keep him in Philadelphia through 2027. Can I sort this camera out now? Because this is winding me up. I need to find it somewhere. But I just don't know how to stop it. And I'm trying. Maybe you can find it in settings. No, there has to be some. There has to be a setting somewhere, but I don't want to do it on stream. If I'm getting seasick, right? I'll tell you what. I've got a new plan. Wait there, new plan, and I've knocked that off. Hang on. Right. Is this better? Does it stop moving? Maybe it'll stop moving now. Yeah. All right. I've moved it down. We've done that. That would do it for now. I just have to look at a microphone stand in front of me. Right. Forget the last 5 minutes. We're talking Lane Johnson now. And a helmet that I knocked off. See, merchandise. We're jazzing up the office slowly but surely. Lane Johnson, 1 year extension. So he's now with the team through 2027. He was contracted through 2026. This was very much a payday move for the Eagles where they wanted to reward arguably the best player in the last decade. You could argue. I mean, he's been on the team since 2013 when the team picked him, 4th overall in that 2013 draft. You can argue he has been the most impactful player, the most impactful Eagle of the last 10 years. I think it goes like there are very few that have had the longevity. Brandon Graham and Jason Kelsey are both certainly up there. But Lane Johnson's now nearly 35 years old. To get a 1 year extension, to keep him there through 2027 is huge for him. And if I'm honest, I think the big thing, and we'll get to this right now, that actually ties in very nicely with Birdbrain's comment. In terms of the cap space, the big thing here is I think that Lane Johnson has been the most selfless man on the Eagles roster for the last 5-6 years. I feel like there hasn't been an offseason in the last 5 to 6 years where he hasn't taken some sort of pay cut. He hasn't restructured his deal. He hasn't paraded a bonus. He hasn't done something that's freed up cap space. He's been Howie's go-to guy, right? If Howie needs space to sign Saquon Barkley, if Howie needs space to pay Jalen Hurts, if Howie needs space to get AJ Brown, he gives Lane a call and says, that $10 million that you've got coming, can we push it back 2 years? And Lane's like, yeah, don't worry about it. I've stuck him up. Don't bother me. See you later, and gets back to work. And I think this has been the first time in that time span where Lane Johnson gets a payday for him, where he gets, from what I understand, Birdbrain, it's $8 million extra over the next 2 years and an extra $30 million in guarantees. Now, I don't know when those guarantees will set in, if they're going to be within the next 2 years or if they're over, technically 25, 26, and then there's 2027. It wouldn't surprise me if they get moved to 2027 for some of those guarantees, and then maybe they get prorated again or something like that. But yeah, it's a huge payday for Lane and something that I think we can all agree he very, very much deserves. He's been a constant on this team. He's been someone that we've all grown up is, I was 14, 15 years old when the Eagles drafted him. Has been a key cog on that offensive line and finally gets his payday rather than just sucking up pay and giving it to everyone else, has settled back down and, giving it to the boys and taking it for himself. So fair play to Harry Roseman for looking after his own, and a huge, huge shout to Lane for being so patient and so understanding and letting the team move his contract around so they can build a championship winning roster, not once, but twice. So he finally gets his payday, $8 million over the next 2 years and an extra $30 million in guaranteed money that will be, so I'm assuming the next 3, because the way Schefter's tweet was worded is $8 million over the next 2. But the guarantees are separate. So I would assume that all mostly gets pushed back to 2027. Meanwhile, Marshawn Lynch has been on an absolute tear. Boss man, you look like an American playing a British character. Is that just because I got facial hair? Is it because of the buzz cut now? Is it the court? Is it? But I need clarity on what is making me look more American. Although I did get pulled up on something recently, which was I said the word, if you're going to say that the mayor of the city, you would say the mayor of the city, like the mayor, right? And I said mayor, and apparently in England we say mayor, and I wasn't aware of that, and I got very, very attacked for that. So I'm just gradually transforming into an honorary American. Maybe this is just the next step, Martian. That one though, don't really know what to say to that. He was a handsome-looking fella, wasn't he, Kiko Alonso? He was all right. I don't think I had anything like him, mind, but I'll take it. Greg says, yeah, we got to do a Kenyon Green film breakdown. Becton is gone, and I'm panicking. All right, so let's touch on that. So let's get into some of these moves. That move specifically was very, very confusing to a lot of people, and I think why they're not freaking out is because of one man, and one man only, Jeff of Stoutlandington, purely for that reason. We've seen Jeff Stoutland turn guys like Halapulavati Vaitai, Isaac Sayamalu, Nate Herbig was another one, an undrafted guard that got himself a huge payday after one moderately successful season in Philadelphia. You can go back and look at, I forgot the guy's name now, but the guy that was one of the military schools and they had him and he came in and played a few snaps. Like, they've had this run of just taking, Suro Peta was a most notable example at guard, who undrafted free agent, stuck around the team for a couple of years, had his moment in the sun, got himself a big payday. Like, this has been a recurring theme with Philadelphia. And on the surface, the Kenyon Green signing isn't particularly brilliant. He's someone that has plummeted in terms of his NFL stock value since originally going very early on in the proceedings, has never lived up to the expectation of a first-round pick, was one of the worst offenders if you are to go off Pro Football Focus numbers last year. However, is there upside? Is this a player that you trust, arguably the best offensive line coach in football, maybe the best positional coach in football, to do his thing and to turn water into wine? And I think when you look at, like, has there ever been a player that hasn't turned into something brilliant under Jeff Stoutland? Like, we missed the obvious Jordan Mailata, who'd never played a snap of football before joining the Eagles. He ends up arguably one of the most impactful players on the team. I don't think, I was going to say Tyler Steen, weirdly, would be the only one that hasn't really taken that leap, but I don't think he's just been given the necessary time to do that yet. Like, we saw him in spades there, obviously, when Becton was down and he came in for a minute, held his own pretty well after what was a pretty disappointing summer. Many people expected him to beat out Mekhi Becton in that scenario. I'm not overly concerned with Kenyon Green. I think you're right, Greg, that we do have to do a film breakdown. So maybe we can look at that Wednesday or Friday. Maybe we'll treat you sometime later this week, if not next week, into going into the film stuff and looking at what exactly Kenyon Green brings to the table, what is he lacking, and where Jeff Stoutland can improve him. But realistically, they could sign this man right here, who has been a thorn in my backside since I've started streaming, right? They could sign K1 to play offensive line next year, and I guarantee he would still grade out better than 50% of the offensive guards in the NFL. That's how good Jeff Stoutland is. And maybe K1's a physical freak of nature, and that would play a role as well. But yeah, so I don't think I'm overly concerned. I think it was more of a way of getting something instead of getting nothing, isn't it? Like, if Jeff Stoutland has had an input in that decision, that would all it would be. That's all it would take, really, for anyone to look at that move and go, actually, do you know what? I'm willing to trust Stout. If you just see the Eagles have made a weird trade to get Mekhi Becton and a pick swap, you are probably scratching your head about it. I think the writing was definitely on the wall for Becton at that point. However, as I said, he wanted to be in Philadelphia. From what I understand and what I've, very loosely been told, Becton wanted to be in Philadelphia. He wanted to stay. He was happy to stay. And he was just waiting to see what the open market was like. And then the Chargers came knocking, gave him a big bit of money. And he was like, yeah, fair enough. He's like, sunshine in LA. He's like, it'll be all right. So off he went. And that's that. But when you look at, in terms of risk v reward and the investment to get the return, Becton was a low risk play. Like, you're looking at someone that follows a lot of the same, core paths that Kenyon Green has walked. Former first round pick, didn't really live up to the hype, struggled with injuries, wasn't really all that when he was, landing in Philadelphia. His main calling card was he was built like if The Undertaker and Brock Lesnar had a weird love child. And that was enough to intrigue Stoutland, and he got him through. So I'm not concerned. I'm really not concerned. And if we're going to just grade that move, I would say C, just purely because we don't know much else. Like, it's hard to be negative. It's hard to be positive. Like, there is no way you can be overwhelmingly positive on the player. You can be positive on Jeff Stoutland. You can be positive on what he can do with said player. I don't think we can sit here on a cold Monday night and say, do you know what? I think Kenyon Green is going to be the future, right guard of this offensive line. I just don't see that yet. So C to D, I think, is where I put that in terms of a move. My favorite signings is a good question. Let's get into him. My favorite signing so far is going to be, let's see if you can guess. All right, look, you boys know me better than I know myself probably at this point. You've seen enough of my streams. You've heard me ramble through the years. Who do you think it is? What name's going to rattle off my tongue in the next 30 seconds here? It's my favorite signing they've made so far, knowing the kind of players that I like, the kind of positions that I tend to favor when looking at draft prospects and stuff. For me, I was, no, Martian. No. Martian's is AJ Dillon. It wasn't AJ Dillon. For me, yeah, Birdbrain's got it. There we go. I was doing a little drum roll. Adoree Jackson, I adoried that signing. Look, Adoree Jackson was someone that I was so high on coming out of the NFL draft. He was one of my really early draft crushes. Yeah, I don't know. There was just something about him coming out. I think he was solid during his time. I think it was USC. It's held up okay in his NFL career. There's been real flashes of brilliance. There's been some worrying parts as well. And you're taking a guy that realistically, I think would play nickel. I don't know. It depends how you view it. I think realistically, if you're going off just size and frame and previous experience, I wouldn't trust him starting outside. I wouldn't trust him starting alongside Quinion Mitchell. The downgrade from Slay to Adoree Jackson is significant. I do think Jackson holds up much better against the run. I do think Adoree Jackson is a bit more physical. He's a bit more compact. Very good out of his breaks. Little bit rigid, I would say, at times, and long speed is there, but it's like, I think it almost looks like it's better than, it looks like it's worse than it is, if that makes sense. I think if you were to look at his 40 time, if you were to look at his actual athletic intangibles and you see the speed he has on the cards, you're going to think he should move faster than he does, if that makes sense. So I think, like, I wouldn't trust him. Like, if you're going to compare him to Isaiah Rodgers, I think Rodgers had the more upside given the limited play he had in Philadelphia, given the risk-free reward. With that said, this is someone that it's hard in the NFL to maintain a career as a starting cornerback. It's even harder to do it, 4, 5, 6, 7 years in. And Jackson has never been elite. He's never been terrible. He's solid run of the mill. For the price they get him, you've got someone there that will give Kelee Ringo competition. For me, Kelee Ringo starts next year. Like, I think he had a brilliant summer. He was excellent in the preseason. And it was just unfortunate that he couldn't get the starting role locked down, because it was always going to go to either Rodgers or Quinion Mitchell. Quinion beat him out, and you're certainly not taking snaps away from Darius Slay. So he was just sort of left to sit on the sidelines. Now, I think realistically, Kelee Ringo next year starts. But when you've got someone like Jackson, who is... he's almost built like a slightly smaller Cooper DeJean in a way, that he can play nickel, he can play outside, he's going to give you an alternative option. Ringo is this big, rangy, like lengthy corner that can move really fluidly. Run support, I guess, can be a question mark, like not in a bad way. We just haven't seen many calling cards for it. If you look at Jackson and what he's done with New York, I think that you've got a little bit more of the opposite skills there, which is someone that is much better against the run, probably a bit more suited to the nickel, maybe lacks a bit of length, maybe lacks a bit of speed, but is solid enough to, get him through the trenches. So you add him in and you've got someone that can either back up Cooper DeJean, he can maybe back up Kelee Ringo, or at least give him a run for his money. Let's see where he's at. Okay, like Ringo matched up well in terms of a pacing with Isaiah Rodgers. He seemed to do okay, in terms of almost winning a role at some point in the summer. Where does he fare now against someone that has started in the NFC East? Where does he fare against someone that has had an NFL career, that was strong in college, that is still kicking around the leagues, has some upside left, he's still in his mid-20s? Let's see what he can do. And it's a good grading scale, and it's a low-risk, low-cost grading scale for a corner that I had a draft crush on. So for me, I really like it. I don't think he's going to start next year. I would go all in on Kelee Ringo, but you're giving him just a little bit of flexibility. So for me, I mean, that's a B to a draft grade. I wasn't going to give it like an A star or an A minus or anything like that. I think it is just a run-of-the-mill B signing. You're not getting outrageous value back, but you are getting someone back that can provide. He is going to produce. If you stuck him in there, I would much rather him play than, I don't know, a certain Mr. Bradbury, shall we say, So let's stop saying you have a draft on a crush on a draft football player. Look, game's the game. Draft crushes are real, okay? We all know Aeneas Smith. That was my guy last year. Another receiver that hasn't panned out yet. But there is still time, okay? There is still time. Adoree Jackson, there was one, I think it was that class. It was like him. I think he was in the same class as Marlon Humphrey. and there was a Louisville corner as well. Oh, the name has completely escaped me, but it was the same one as Akilo Weatherspoon, I think, as well. And there were like 3 or 4 corners in that class. Was it Marshall Lattimore? No, I don't know. Either way, there were like 4 or 5 corners in that class that were just exceptional. And I felt Adoree Jackson was one of them. And he's sustained the career. So I'm all for it. Nice to see you back too, Duck. Again, apologies for the lack of streams over the last few weeks, but I am back. Like I said, needed a little bit just to recoup, to regroup, to get ready for the off season ahead. And then was it a couple little internal things where we were debating something with PSN, and we were like, maybe we'll just hold off for a little minute. There was too much news happening to not bite the bullet, come back in and cause some chaos. So we'll be back Monday, Wednesday, Friday. But there should be something pretty fun happening with the PSN channel in the next. I can't put a timeline on it, but it will be happening. Devin Duvernay wasn't. Yeah. He turned out all right, didn't he? Devin Duvernay turned out okay. I was in love with Devin Duvernay. What a man. What a player he is. The streets will not forget sort of player in his college tape. What a baller he is. Jack and Hagar. Cheers, Liam. Like the buzz cut. Thought Wentz was on the show. Hey, look. Well, it beats looking like Kiko Alonso, as I was told earlier. So I appreciate you clocking in as always, my friend. Thank you for hanging out. Ringo needs more snaps now that he's had a few years and consistent coaching staff and philosophy. I agree. I think he's really going to be something that I haven't seen one mildly average play like from him. And that's probably an exaggeration. But when looking at him actually on the field, I think he's been beyond impressive in every stretch. Like in terms of what's expected of him and what he actually does, especially in that preseason, very impressed. So a couple other players then, let's get to them because there have been 3, I believe, other notables. We'll start with the most boring one, which is DTR, Dorian Thompson-Robinson. Could not care less, if I'm honest. I feel the Eagles have been cursed with playing the Cleveland Browns non-stop in preseason for as long as I've been alive. Like, they always seem to play the Browns, and that has meant recently a healthy dose of a quarterback that is somehow less competent than like Nate Sudfeld. Then I'm trying to think really deep dive, like awful Eagles backups in preseason where when you look at them, you're like, oh, for fuck's sake, got 2 quarters of this guy. Anyway, I mean, Chase Daniel, there we go. He's worse than Chase Daniel. I mean, Chase Daniel is a proven backup, but in terms of just watching a quarterback play and seeing anything moderately interesting that you like, Dorian Thompson-Robinson has none of that. Absolutely none of it. The guy's a non-factor. If I'm honest, I think that is a very lower-end quarterback designed to be another grading scale for Tanner McKee. I think that's the same sort of thing we see with Rigo and Adoree Jackson. I think that's a player that's going to come in and try and compete for QB3. I think that's going to be an interesting spot. We've seen it before where they get these like 4 or 5 year veteran players that can come in and then they don't really hang around and they end up sticking with the 7th round or undrafted quarterback that they've had for a couple of years. I think realistically, that's what DTR is. Like, he's not going to back up Jalen Hurts. Like, Jalen Hurts is too valuable. I think he does need someone behind him, you know, like he had in 2024. Like, Kenny Pickett was never going to set the world on fire. He also wasn't going to be the reason the world set on fire. And that's what they need. DTR, the world would absolutely go up in a ball of smoke. So I don't think he is going to be anywhere close to QB2. Realistically, there's going to be another player coming in. I don't know. I've not looked at the open markets for backup quarterbacks. I've kind of been a little bit distracted with edge rushes and potentially linebackers and a few other spots. But yeah, I can't see them getting anywhere near rolling with DTR for the season to come. So he's going to probably be a grading scale for Tanner McKee, and I think Tanner McKee blows him out the water this preseason. Meanwhile, it's also been good to see that the amount of draft crush heritage we've got. The John Hightower infamous draft crush will live on eternally. It is not going anywhere. Clayton Thorson wasn't a draft crush. Thorson was just someone that I randomly grew an affinity to for no reason whatsoever. Just because it was funny, I think. And then I made the song, and then the song kind of just become a thing, and it was just fun to wind people up with. And then the more the song got played and the more I would like tweet about it, the more it just caught on. Like, he was like a Captain Cravon level, but only actually Cravon was competent. But yeah, the John Hightower crush, it didn't get cringy. It did not. All right. He's going to be a good receiver in this league. He's not in the league anymore, is he? He's the dream's done. I've let it go. It's fine. A couple more other players, though, that were signed internally. There's one player, isn't there, ladies and gentlemen, that we have to talk about. I'm going to sit up very upright, very proudly, talking about this one as the camera struggles to catch up. One player, one man, one supremacy. Zach Bourne. A man who, look, it wasn't a draft crush. Was it a free agency crush? Is that a thing? I would argue it certainly was. Zach Bourne getting the contract that a lot of people thought he wouldn't was absolutely huge for this Eagles team. They haven't paid a linebacker in forever. They haven't paid a running back in forever. And now they have Saquon Barkley and they have Zach Bourne. Like, you cannot write the trajectory that this season is carried out over the last, or off season's carried out, over the last couple of months. For me, Zach Bourne was such a generational season. Like, you don't get those very often. You might hit on a linebacker that has special teams upside that can contribute defensively. The level to that is like an Alex Singleton. It's a TJ Edwards. It's someone like that. It's very, very rare that you see someone categorized in that same area burst onto a team, get the starting role, and just take it over in a way that a player hasn't in Philadelphia in that position since, I would say, Jordan Hicks. I think that's the last linebacker I can think of that had that sizable impact where the fans were begging to keep around. If Jordan Hicks could stay healthy, maybe that's what Zach Bourne's career would have been like. And he was just like the sweetest guy. He's so just selfless, I think, in interviews. He's so warm to reporters. I've never heard a bad word about him. And to watch that season be rewarded with not only an all-pro selection, not only with a Super Bowl, but a monumental payday that keeps him in Philadelphia it brings a smile to my face. I would be lying if I said I wasn't buzzing like an erotic bumblebee. I think it was just such a good move. And I didn't think they were going to do it. I think he was going to get the Josh Sweat treatment, which is you let him go because you can't afford him, and you replace him in the aggregate, which is what the Eagles did. And we'll get on that in a little bit with Josh Uche and, of course, more recently, Azeez Ojulari, who signed with the team today, formerly of the New York Giants. But instead, they actually just went, no, we want Bourne. He wants to be here. Let's make it. I think he's like the 5th or 6th highest paid linebacker in the league at the minute, which isn't actually that high if you think about it. When you're talking, if you're going to pay a top 2-3 linebacker in the league, they better be elite. I think for Bourne being 5th or 6th, it's how we undercut in the market again, because there are going to be now, given the way that the NFL has moved, and we spoke about this a lot in streams, where it was all perimeter players, it was all speedy players, it was the Tyreek Hills of the world, and Deebo Samuels and Christian McCaffreys, and just wanting to absolutely weaponize the perimeter with as much speed and pace as you can possibly find, that it really limited linebackers because they had to get lighter. They had to get more agile to keep up with these players horizontally. You're now in an era where Saquon Barkley has just had the greatest NFL rushing season of our generation. Derrick Henry wasn't too far behind him, and there are a few other notable names as well. If we start seeing this new meta of teams running the ball downhill again, you're going to need the linebackers of old. You're going to need those thicker, more physical, more violent, for lack of a better term, linebackers to keep up and to try and limit the damage that these running backs can do. So to sign Zach Bourne, who was just a monumentally talented linebacker this past season, yeah, it just made too much sense. So I'm all for it. And I was very, very happy reading that one. Meanwhile, Duck says McKee has QB2 locked. I hope so. DTR's getting trained up for when McKee's value is at its highest. I could see that. That's definitely a possibility for him. Again, I'm not too high on DTR. I've never been anywhere close to. I mean, it was the one quarterback where, look, I used to play a lot of daily fantasy. Okay, I used to love DraftKings, and they banned it in England because they're idiots, and I'm fuming at them. And if I could short that company's stock into oblivion, I would, out of pure spite. I'm fine. But I used to love playing DraftKings in preseason because I always felt like I had a bit of an edge because I, research all the players, and I'm constantly looking at players and writing articles about 5 preseason players to watch and, positional battles. And like matchups when the third stringers play and all of that good stuff. So I had a bit of knowledge on who would and wouldn't get snaps just from researching. Whereas I think most people betting on preseason DraftKings are probably more degenerates than they are researching stuff. And they just go for the big names. So the amount of times I would have to research Dorian Thompson-Robinson and have to watch film just because he was playing the Eagles and have him in lineups, I've got a vendetta against him because he was absolutely useless. So, yeah, I don't think he's getting anywhere near QB2, as you say, Duck. And if he can be developed, then so be it. I'll be happy to see it. But I don't hold high hopes. Why does the bumblebee have to be erotic? Because Liam is a sick boy. No, think about it. It's levels, all right? A bumblebee is buzzing, buzz. If it's there was a different word normally used, but I was trying to keep it PG. But an erotic bumblebee is like, buzz, buzzing. We've got to try and keep it tame. All right, we're before the watershed. Bourne has no replacement in house that is ready. He was a great re-signing, absolutely. Let's talk on one of the other. I mentioned this earlier. We'll get to the big ones now. 2 edge rushers signed over the last week or so. So the first one was Josh Uche of the New England Patriots. And the second one was Azeez Ojulari from the New York Giants. Now, what's interesting with both of those players is neither had a spectacular season. Josh, more specifically, has been a very solid rotational player for a number of years now. Like, he has been very impactful in a variety of different schemes as well, where there's been a bit of unrest in the teams that he's been on, continue to contribute. And there were a few seasons where I thought he was genuinely just going to be the next big payday, and it never really panned out. He's good. I like Josh Uche. I like what he brings to the table. He's quite versatile. Reminds me a little bit of like a thicker Jalix Hunt, I guess. Whereas when we first looked at Jalix Hunt's college tape, we weren't saying he was going to rush the edge. We were like, I think he's going to drop back. I think he's going to be this hybrid player that can, hurt you in a multitude of ways. He can drop back into coverage so the other guys can come down. He's very quick laterally. He's got a menacing nature when it comes to rushing the passer. I think Uche is that same sort of player. And again, you're getting someone there that has a proven sack record as opposed to a track record and that can do it at the NFL level. He's done it for a number of years. Like, for the money that you're paying him, it's a good move. When you look at losing Josh Sweat and Brandon Graham, all that's left in that depth chart before these signings were Nolan Smith, who has had a breakout year. Can he be trusted? Yeah, I would like to think so. Is he going to be a full-time starter? I think so. That takes away as good as that is, your most efficient depth option that you had. Because before we forget the Bryce Huff injury, before the Brandon Graham injury, he was a rotational edge rusher and he was very, very good at it and he was building in confidence. And then he became a starter, which is brilliant. But it now means that there is that gap underneath, and it's a sizable gap down now because all that you have under Nolan Smith and potentially Bryce Huff, who I'm sure we're going to talk about in just a second, is Jalix Hunt, really. There's no one else of any notoriety or anything like that. So you needed to bring in some solid depth that has been there, done it, can contribute in a pinch, and can put up a few sacks. You're not asking for 10 sack seasons out of these guys. You're not even asking for 5. You're asking for 2 to 4 sacks a year, a few tackles for a loss, to come in a pinch and maintain the energy that those front guys are putting out. And with someone like Nolan Smith, who can wreck things very easily, with Jalix Hunt's speed and explosiveness, and the wild card that is Bryce Huff, you're not going to need full-time edge rushers. You just need guys that can play 30-40% of snaps at most and do some damage. And both of these guys, Azeez Ojulari II, can do just that. I think Ojulari is maybe the more intriguing of the two players. He's still very early in his career. I believe he's 24 years old, drafted back in 2021. Has been languishing in the NFC East for a few years with the Giants. A couple of injury-ridden seasons, like he's struggled a little bit with durability. That's been the main knock on him. It's not that he hasn't been productive. It's that he's been absent, and as coaches say, the best kind of ability is availability. And that's something that Ojulari hasn't had. Now, when he has been active, as we've seen this year, when he had 6 sacks and 10 QB hits, he's been pretty damn good. He's been effective in a defense that was otherwise absolutely terrible. And that counts for something. So for $4 million, you get a player that's 24 years old, a former Georgia Bulldog, and he joins the other 6 Bulldogs on this defense now in Carter, Dean, Davis, Smith, Ringo. That's 5. There's one I'm missing. Who am I missing? I know there's another one in there. I've missed someone obvious, haven't I? Don't know. Anyway, yeah. So realistically, they've replaced Josh Sweat in the aggregate, which is very Moneyball-esque, and that's kind of where I got the quote from. But that's what they've done. They've seen Josh Sweat sack production, and they've gone, all right, well, instead of paying Sweat 10, 12, $15 million a year, can we get a couple of budget guys that maybe have some question marks, whether it be durability, whether it be scheme fit, character, whatever it is, and get something out of them. And Josh Uche is someone that, again, felt like he was always the next guy up and just never was. And then you've got another prospect in Azeez Ojulari, who has been there, like almost been the guy, and then gets an injury or almost gets something good, and the team's absolutely useless. So I like both of the players. I think both of them are going to be, edge 3, edge 4. Like, they're not going to be, 3 down starters or anything like that. And of course, the wild card in all of this is Bryce Huff. And this is the player where this entire edge position now hinges on. And it's not a discussion I don't think any of us wanted. Now, what's really confused me, though, is that people seemed almost like very intent to trade Bryce Huff. Like, you can raise your hand. It's opinion, it's football, it's subjective. If you wanted to trade Bryce Huff at the start of this offseason, I get it, because they've paid a lot of money for a player that hasn't done a lot, right? That makes sense. And there's a lot of PTSD when you look at big money spent and the returns are diminishing and you need to get out quick before it becomes a burden to carry on your roster. The thing with Bryce Huff, and the people in this stream that have been here since day one when we signed him last year and we broke down the tape, there was nothing spectacular on tape about him. Nothing stood out that was mind-blowingly good, right? What was there was a player that was played in a rotational role, and because of that, had so much speed and so much explosiveness in that first step that he was just ripping apart bruised and beaten down offensive lines who are 10, 12, 15 plays into a drive, and he can just walk through him and make a sack. That's where he was valuable. That's where he had his monster season with the Jets. When you sign into a big deal at the age he was, the assumption was he would immediately become a 3-down edge rusher. It was never going to happen. The contract he was given was designed, in my opinion, to give him a road to being a 3-down edge rusher, which involved, as we all said, I said and a couple of others said when watching that tape from the Jets, it's not going to be year one. Year one was always going to be bad for Bryce Huff because he's never done it. Like, you can't go from a sprinter to an Olympic marathon runner in the space of 6 months. It doesn't work like that. If you're in a rotational role and you're using all of your energy on getting off the line, getting past your guy, getting to the quarterback, and just being a menace with tunnel vision on doing that in one play before you go back off to the bench, put your mask on, chill out, listen to some music, end up on NFL mic'd up, and that's it. That's different than when you've got to repeat that 30 seconds later, then do it again, then do it again, then do it. Like, all of a sudden, these short bursts of energy have got to be sustained. And if you don't learn how to do that, how to almost recalibrate yourself so you're not just all in and you can go at 50%, but that 50% is still good, you're not going to be effective. And that's a tough transition for any edge player in the NFL. This was always going to be a multi-year thing with Bryce Huff. And trading him now, in my opinion, bails on that whole thesis. It bails on the whole reason that he was brought in. Now, is that to say it wasn't more disappointing than it should have been? No, I think it was. I think the injury, I think the lack of effort, I think the lack of production were all somehow worse than I imagined. I mean, I knew it would be bad. I didn't think it would be cataclysmic. But you're also talking about a player, again, who was signed for 5 years. Imagine it like you're trading a stock. If you bought $10,000 worth of Apple and it went down 5% and you panicked and you sold, and then Apple goes up 3 years later because they launch a new product and their earnings are really good and you would have made 60%, you've got to look silly. That's where I think the Eagles are right now, is that they've seen a drop that maybe wasn't expected, but is the long-term reason that they signed Bryce Huff still valid? Does that still matter? Arguably now more than ever, I would say, purely because the guys behind the depth, all right, EDGE and Ojulari, both good depth guys. Jalix Hunt is vicious, as we've seen. They've got contingency plans if Bryce Huff doesn't pan out. If Bryce Huff evaporated from that team and was on a phantom IR all year, the edge rusher position, as of right now, would be absolutely fine. And that's a good spot to be. The other thing is that in 2026, the Eagles have like 73 draft picks. I would say that's exaggerating. If I'm honest, I think that's kind of closer to reality than we realize. They've got a lot of draft capital. And I think there's 9 picks in the first 3 rounds that they have. So you're talking in 2026 about the opportunity to get guys who are going to be, 20, 21 years old, who are scouted properly in a way that Nolan Smith was, who fits the team, fits the culture, is a locker room leader, maybe has been a team captain, likely a Georgia Bulldog, and can make a difference. By then, Bryce Huff's contract is going to be nearing its end, and you make the decision then to move on from him, because that's the bridge that he was signed for, to bridge the gap between we've got nothing but Nolan Smith to we can get the next generation as Nolan Smith peaks into being something special. To me, that's the plan. And I think bailing from it early is just not right. But I've been wrong. And, if they do that, then they obviously are more concerned with his growth or, lack of it than we know. And obviously, we're not in the locker room every day. We don't see these players day in, day out. We don't see the effort of practice. And we don't have a feel on their mentality and where they want to be. So if there is a move, that would just be a glaring sign that Howie's recognised a mistake. It's not gone to plan, and they can reuse those assets to strengthen their position some other way. But I would also equally be not surprised in the slightest if he is starting week 1 in 2025. The only other player that has signed, I believe, as a free agent is AJ Dillon. And we'll get to that situation in a minute, Birdbrain, because I think that's also very interesting. I think the AJ Dillon signing is good. I think that's much more of a LeGarrette Blount-esque running back than Kenny Gainwell ever would be. It wouldn't surprise me if they look for a more versatile option out of the backfield. I mean, you've got Will Shipley, having said that. Like, Shipley can do that. I don't know why I completely forgot about Super Will and his moment in the sun. But I think that if you go for someone like smaller, lighter, that can just catch screens and make an effort, then you've got yourself a complete backfield behind Barkley for any situation, because it felt like that the backfield was a little bit limited beyond Barkley. Now, I'm not in any way criticizing that, because it was shaped around Saquon Barkley being a 3-down back and knowing that you don't need those other backs. You haven't got to pay anyone significant money. You don't need Kenny Gainwell to do anything spectacular. You're just a change of pace guy. But if you can get a change of pace guy like AJ Dillon, who is straight downhill, a bit more physical, a bit tougher to bring down, and then another change of pace back who maybe it is Shipley, maybe they go after someone else as well, bit more versatile, bit more agile, bit lighter, that can make some plays in open space, then you've got a variety of solutions to whatever a defense presents you when Saquon isn't there. Because Saquon's greatest strength is he can do absolutely everything. And when he's not there, your playbook's going to become limited to the running back that is on the field. And if you can get someone that ticks a certain box and the other one ticks the other box, you'll be fine. Dillon has one pace, which is slow. Yeah, he's not exactly Derrick Henry, is he? I get it. But is he going to protect the football? Is he going to be tough to bring down? Is he going to grind those hard yards in short yardage situations? Yeah, like no one is expecting AJ Dillon to break off a 65-yard home run. Maybe they're expecting him to get a first down on 3rd and 2. That, I think, is why he's been signed. So I'm all for it. I would grade that like a B+, because it's a cheap deal. It's a very Howie-esque move with a running back that, has experience, can just come in and do a job. That's all he's needed to do there, really. So I'm all for it. I feel you, Liam, says Mr. Moody. But all this tells me is that we will pick 2 defensive ends or outside linebackers in the first 4 rounds. I don't know this year. I think next year will be the one for that. I've not done a mock draft yet. Maybe I'll do my first mock draft on stream like next week sometime. I don't know. I don't know. Because if I'm going off team needs now, safety is up there just because of the way that's panned out. Like, look, I was as shocked as anyone that Chauncey Gardner-Johnson went, when he did. I know there's been murmurs of Justin Simmons to Philadelphia, but that has been the case for literally about a decade. I think every year that I've run PSN, Justin Simmons, even when he was a child, has been linked to the Philadelphia Eagles. And I don't know why. Like, he's a good safety. Every year that passes, he's getting older. I don't see it. So Liam will wait until after the draft to do his mock. When is the draft? April 28th? Let me have a look at it. Hang on. I don't know when the draft is. I've not checked yet. That's the only thing with the Super Bowl is that, like, if the Eagles are in the Super Bowl, like, normally there's a nice gap of the season ending and then the off season, and you can build for free agency and you can get content around it. Then it transitions to the Senior Bowl. Then it's the draft. And now we just get dropped in it. And it is, excuse me, April 24th. All right. So we got a month. Nice. So I'm trying not to cough. Leave that with me. I'll do a mock draft for you guys next week. We'll get started and we'll start doing our prospect big board stuff in that time as well. So do you remember like last year when we would like open up our big spreadsheet and you guys would give me players and then we'd watch film on them and I would give them a rating out of 10 and we'd build this big board of players that I like and dislike. We're doing that again. All right, we're running that back because that was a lot of fun last time. And it was how I found Aeneas Smith, who turned out to be absolutely average. So, yeah, we'll get into that and we'll like, dive into some draft prospects and I'll do a mock maybe like a week after doing it. Because I've not watched any tape. Like, I'm very slow with draft prospects. Like, I cover the team and then when draft season rolls around, like I don't watch a lot of college football because I'm in England and we get like one game a week on TV. So all my CFB knowledge this year comes from College Football 24, which is not a good place to start. So, we'll get diving. We will get diving into prospects. We'll do some film room stuff. And if you guys have players that you want me to break down, don't drop them in the chat just yet. Do it to Wednesday and we will get started then. So we'll see. But yeah, I'm excited for it. I do love diving into prospect stuff. It's some of the most fun streams that I'll do. I hear differently, says Greg. I had 2 offensive lines, an offensive tackle that can play guard, defensive end, linebacker, safety, and running back projects. I would say the swing tackle makes sense. I don't think that's their biggest priority. I think guard depth is. If I was to go off the offensive line, I think just, to be fair, what I've done there is just repeat your comment and not give it a tackle name. But yeah, I think like they're going to need some interior depth, especially with Becton now gone. If Steen does get the promotion and he can't, if Steen can't beat out Kenyon Green, we've got bigger problems to worry about. So I would assume Tyler Steen starts. Do you want Kenyon Green as the backup? Do you believe that Jeff Stoughton can turn him into something? Like, you need more of these like little gems that they seem to find in the depths of the draft or undrafted pools, where it's Nate Herbig, it's Ciro Petta, it's Big V, players like that. Who was that other one that came in? The guy that did the Halo theme, he was cool. But I think they have to try and find those low ones. I think for this draft, I've not seen what the draft looks like, but I know there's a big gap between like the top 5 and then everyone else. From what I've seen, okay, so I don't know, but from what I've seen, that seems to be the consensus. So with that in mind, and knowing obviously now the Eagles picked last in the draft because they won the Super Bowl, realistically, that's my favorite word, you're probably going to prioritize picks later in the draft. Like, you don't have to go reaching in round 1. You've already got a Super Bowl roster. They could roll out tomorrow and they've got a team good enough to get back to the Super Bowl, in my opinion. So I don't think there's a pressing need that would require them to move up or to get someone that isn't there, especially when you've got so much capital in 2026 as well. Like, whether you want to leverage that for this year is entirely up to them. But I think, just looking at the shape of the roster, they don't have to go aggressively reaching for anyone. So when you look at the needs, they need a safety because right now there's just no one back there. Like, you got Reed Blankenship and who's Army at the minute, unless you move Cooper DeJean up. Now, that would make sense with the Adoree Jackson signing because Jackson's a little bit shorter. I think he's around 5'11", can play the nickel, hasn't done it a lot, but can. Maybe that's it. And then we have Coop up top, then you don't need a safety anymore and you can just get some more developmental players. But the offensive line, I think, is key. Like, you've got to get a couple of guards back there. Maybe a developmental tackle as well, because outside of Fred Johnson, who was, I've been told, very good. Isaac was very defensive of him, and I was proven wrong about Fred Johnson. So I hold my hands up there that I was a little bit mean when he was actually okay. But there aren't many players that have, I think, proven their salt in Eagles colours just yet as a backup tackle. So you need to get a couple more of those for sure. Defensive end, I don't know. I think you've got a group good enough now to roll into next year. Again, like, if you're looking at the rotation now, it'll be Huff, likely, Smith, Hunt, and then, Ojulari and Uche. You've got your guys there that are going to make some waves and get to the quarterback. Linebacker, maybe. Obviously, you've got Bourne, you've got Trott, you've got Dean, but Dean's in his contract year now, so he has to do well. He might miss a part of that because of the injury. You're going to need some depth there. I think linebacker would probably take a bit more precedent over the edge rusher for that reason. And then running back, I think you've got Will Shipley, you've just signed AJ Dillon, you've got Saquon Barkley. I can't see that being high on their list of things. Tight end, I would say certainly is. And that would get us to Birdbrain's comment about Dallas Goedert. And just before we get to that, I think that would be our final point before we round out the show, because they have just signed 2 tight ends. Just a quick shout to CMV Eagles. So I've not seen comment here before, and he might not be in the stream anymore, but I just wanted to say hello. Hello. I was meant to be this song and just realized you want to know what song I was doing, and that just sounded really, really weird. But no, nice to see you tuning in, my friend. Thank you for hanging out and watching the stream with us. Welcome to the chat. Hope you're having a good time. So the Eagles have obviously gone out and signed 2 tight ends over the last few days. What does this mean for Dallas Goedert, first and foremost? Now, he's had his name listed in trade discussions for 2-3 years now, depending on who you talk to. He's still here. Love that, CMV Eagles. What a baller. Thank you for hanging out, my friend. Goedert's had his name in trade discussions for a while. The issue is now that he's getting a bit older, his production's slowing down. He's not going to be, the lead target that he once was. There was a brief window where Zach Ertz departed and Goedert was the guy where he could have and should have been this elite tight end to break out and make that role his own. I think instead what happened was injuries caught up a little bit. Then you become a run-first team, and Goedert has always been a remarkably talented run blocker. His services were needed there more than they were through the air. So against the run blocking side of things, you're not going to find many people better than Dallas Goedert just because he's been so reliable for so long. The issue has been durability. Now, you're in a spot where he's getting a bit older. There are going to be contract discussions, and there aren't still many viable solutions behind him. Like, I like Grant Calcaterra. I think Grant is a very solid young player. I think he was great when he first came out of college and had a little summer fling for a minute where we all thought he might become tight end 2. Then Jack Stoll happened and ruined our fun because he's boring. And then Calcaterra breaks out 1 year later and begins to make some moves. So we've got some upside there from a receiving perspective, but we don't have a solid run blockers. Now, what the Eagles have done is gone out and get a couple of tight ends who are more run blocky than they are pass receiving, for lack of a better term. And I think that you're going to need that. Regardless of what happens to Goedert, you need tight ends who are a bit more proficient at blocking than they are catching in this instance. Because if you're going to go for a receiving tight end, you have to contend with the fact that you've got Devontae Smith, you've got AJ Brown, you've got Saquon Barkley. You've got a lot of mouths to feed, all right? You just do. I would put Jahan Dotson in there. I don't think he's a big mouth to feed at this point. You can give him a Rice Krispie and I'm sure he'll be happy with it. Unlike AJ Brown, who's going to want himself a King's dinner, you're not going to get a lot of traffic anymore. So there's no point in going for a Kyle Pitts of the world, for instance. Now, with that said, if they went out and got a Kyle Pitts, I would literally do 8 shoeies in a row on stream, and that would be the entire stream because it would be the best thing I've ever seen in my life. However, given the shape of this offense now, a lot of it I feel is on pass protection, it's on run blocking. you don't need that tight end looming downfield, making plays in open space. So Goddard's usage has changed. That is going to naturally and unfortunately hinder trade value, because for some reason NFL GMs do what we do, just open up a stats site and go, oh, his yards were down, and then they'll give you like a 7th round pick when his value should be like a 5th. I don't know. It's really hard to say. I don't want to see him leave Philadelphia because he's just been great since he got here. Like, he's been really good. He's been a really great core member of this offense for so long. And I wouldn't want to see him play anywhere else. He wasn't like Zach Ertz level fan favorite or reach Zach Ertz levels of production, but he was certainly good enough for long enough that I think we would all be a bit sad if he left. So it comes down to whether or not the Eagles believe that the 2 tight ends they've brought in are going to be good enough against the run to facilitate Grant Calcaterra filling a niche role. And that niche role is just play receiver. Just be a slot receiver. Just be a big slot. Don't worry about anything else. Just be the big slot receiver that you can be. Go out there, make some catches, and let these guys do the dirty work. I think that's the only way that works. But I think realistically now, he says again, you're going to be looking at a scenario where they finally draft one. And it's been a long time coming. Like, they should have done it 2 years ago. They didn't. They should have done it last year, in my opinion. They didn't. They now are in a spot where they might have to do it this year. Because if they don't, Goddard could just end up on another team within 12 months anyway. And there are still no viable options behind him. So if you want to get a viable tight end option through the draft, this is the one to do it. If not, you're just going to hope that these 2 young guys can come in, do some of the heavy lifting, and then allow the likes of Grant Calcaterra to just take on that niche role as a borderline big slot receiver, and do what he does best. I think that's probably the best way to look at it. I don't want to see Goddard leave. Again, I love him. I think he's a great player, great guy. Once signed a postcard and wrote PSN season on it. So always got a lot of respect and a lot of time for him. No idea if he even knew what PSN was at the time, but he wrote it anyway. And, that's always good. So, yeah, I want to see him stay. I think there's a chance we see him go, because the last thing the Eagles want to do is do that thing that Howie's tended to do and veered away from, in fairness, in recent years, which is just hang on for players a little bit too long. The the trade value just does sort of evaporate, and you end up in a bit of a bind where you're stuck with a lengthy back end of a contract that you can't get out of, and you have to let them go. And that sucks for both parties, because the player then ends up a bit screwed. It ends with an ugly goodbye, and at least you can let him choose his next destination. And there'll be plenty of teams where he can take on a role and run back the clock and be like prime 2019, 2020 Dallas Goedert, where he's causing chaos and making a lot of catches. So it depends what he wants as well. But as a 2-time Super Bowl champion, a 1-time Super Bowl champion, he was 1 year after 2017, I don't think there's that much left for him to do now in Philadelphia. So maybe that plays into it as well. Maybe we do see Goddard on the move. But yeah, I don't know. We'll see. I'm kind of up in the air with it. I think what they've done is, again, provide an insurance plan for if he does leave, you replace him in the aggregate in the same way they did with Josh Sweat. Sweat leaves, and for a fraction of the cost, they bring in Uche, they bring in Ojulari. The 2 sack totals from 2024 combined to like 11, I think. Which replaces Sweat's production. Goddard's a similar story. If you look at the production from the 2 guys they signed, near enough marries up to what Goddard did in 2024. Both are pretty proficient in run blocking. They're not pass receiving threats as such. If you lose Goddard, you at least have options there. For the time being, until we get to the draft or until they want to examine more trade scenarios, they've just got themselves a firm base, which I think is all they could ask for. And on that note, that is the end of the stream. We've hit our first stream back. So it's been a good one, apart from my camera doing this, which is really winding me up. And I will work out how to stop that before I go crazy, because it is doing my head in. But I appreciate you all hanging out. I apologize again for the lack of streams since the Super Bowl. Just been busy with a few things. And again, wanted to take a little bit of a break before we dove straight back into draft content and film breakdowns. And then the Eagles just went on a free agency tear and couldn't let it go any longer. I had to come in, give my thoughts on the players that have signed, some of the players that have gone, and some of the players yet to be named Philadelphia Eagles. So thank you to everyone that's hung out tonight. It's been great seeing your lovely faces again, apart from K1. Joking. Even more lovely to see yours. I appreciate all of you. I hope you enjoy the rest of your Monday. We might have a Flipping the Birds episode tomorrow. If not, I will see you on Wednesday, 6 p.m. Eastern. I know the start of this stream was a little bit delayed because I had to write an article about the Lane Johnson contract, so I was a little bit behind on that. But until Wednesday, thank you for hanging out, guys. Go Birds, the Super Bowl champion Birds, the two-time Super Bowl champion Birds. I'll see you Wednesday. And I've hit the wrong button. I'll see you Wednesday.